Hey everyone, you're with Tesla Tom. Thanks so much for joining us on Ludicrous Feed. I've got a very special guest with us today, Pete from NRMA. Thanks for joining us, Pete.
G'day.
Now, Pete, we're in your beautiful new offices here in Sydney.
Yep.
First week, I believe, in operations.
Yeah, third day, first interview in the new office, so we've broken some new ground.
So, Pete, what is the role of the NRMA in Australia?
So the NRMA was actually set up, well, it's almost 100 years now. We'll be celebrating our centenary next year. But it was set up originally as a lobby group. So this was when Australia was going through its first transport revolution. We were moving from the horse and cart to the combustion engine. And a bunch of motorists got together not far from here at Town Hall Station and talked about the need to have a voice to fight for better roads, because what we were starting to see was people were buying more cars, the first cars globally, and we didn't have the infrastructure to cope. Some of this is going to sound familiar, of course, 100 years later. And so the NRMA was first set up as a voice for the first motorists in Australia, and then the services that we provide that we've become quite famous for, like our roadside assistance, for example, followed. So we're an organisation that focuses on transport and tourism services. We are national, but very much at the heart of what we do is that work that we started to do 100 years ago was to be a voice for the motorists of this country and also advocates for issues around transport and tourism.
So 100 years later, as you alluded to, we're now transitioning to electric cars potentially. It's certainly in the national conversation currently. What's the role of the NRMA moving forward in the next 10 to 20 years? Yeah,
well, we started this conversation 2006 actually was when we first started to talk to our members, to the public, to the community, to policymakers about the role of alternative transport options, and obviously electric vehicles was in that mix. We've obviously seen some progress in this country since then, but only now are we starting to see the debate or the discussion taking place at a national level. Obviously, we're in the midst of this federal election campaign, and had you said to the NRMA 4 weeks ago that electric vehicles was going to be front and centre of the national debate, we probably would have laughed at it, but here we are. So it's an important conversation that we need to have as a country. The NRMA has a vital role to play, not just physically, because we are literally building an infrastructure network, but also as an advocate for this transition from a transport perspective, because what we are now starting to see is that second revolution, the first one being transitioning from the horse and cart to the combustion engine. The second one, obviously, is now looking at electric vehicles and the likelihood that they are going to play a part in our future.
What are some of the obstacles preventing Australia uptaking electric vehicles?
We're so far behind. I think probably the biggest obstacle is that primitive element of it, that Australia has not adopted the technology at the same rate that other countries have. Depending on how you measure the numbers, we're either last or second last among OECD countries in terms of the uptake of electric vehicles. We have nowhere near the infrastructure we need, and the number of options that are available to Australians if they did want to buy an electric vehicle are quite limited compared to overseas. And so there are some natural obstacles that we will have to address as a nation. Our sheer size as a country is one of them, and making sure that we have the infrastructure so that people can charge whenever they want, wherever they want. That will come the same way it did when we built service stations. And so we've been here before as a country. We don't need to panic. We do have time, but there is a global transition happening, and we need to be prepared for that and not to be afraid of it, because there are a number of benefits that Australians will get as a result of this transition.
I think in my research, one of the key issues is range anxiety. And I think infrastructure plays a role in helping that, to alleviate range anxiety. What's the NRMA doing about that?
Yeah, range anxiety is obviously the biggest challenge that we face right now in Australia. We're not at price parity yet with ICE vehicles, with internal combustion engines. We will get there soon. So the price is a factor, but I think overwhelmingly for most people, it is that range anxiety element. You can fill your car up at the pump in a few minutes. It takes half an hour on one of NRMA's fast charger. So, look, there are challenges that we need to address, but we can start now. We are behind, but we're not that far behind that we can't catch up. Australia is very good when it comes to adopting new technology. Smartphone penetration in Australia is the highest in the world, so we're not afraid of new things here. We just need to do what needs to be done now. NRMA is leading the way in that respect. We have already started by building a fast charging network here in New South Wales. We're focusing on regional areas. We started about 18 months ago to roll these things out, so we are going to continue down that path. Our goal is to build at least 40 of these fast chargers across regional areas, and the intent is to have one at least every 150 kilometres, so that if you do buy an electric vehicle, if you want to enjoy regional New South Wales, if you want to take the family on a holiday up or down the coast or go out to the bush, and if you want to buy an electric vehicle, we want to make sure you can do all of the above.
So at least 40 chargers. How many have you got currently in New South Wales?
So we've just unveiled our 10th in Bathurst. We've got one in Sydney. We won't focus on Sydney because I think Sydney will take care of itself. There'll be a number of options in Sydney. And of course, for people who live in Sydney, there's always the option of charging your car at home if you have that capacity, if you're parking your car in a garage. So we're looking at regional areas. We've already started to target strategic tourism locations because a big part of why we're doing this, well, there's two reasons. First of all, we want to open up regional New South Wales. We're big supporters of regional tourism, of local tourism, and so we're targeting those areas we know people like to visit. We've got one in Jindabyne for the snow. You can get to the Hunter Valley and back now. We've got chargers in the winery areas in the Hunter Valley. We've started down the south coast. We're starting out western New South Wales, and soon we'll be going up the north coast. So we'll be strategically targeting those areas that we know people like to go, and we want to open up those areas because it's an effective way to support regional communities and boost regional tourism, which boosts regional economies. The second reason why we wanted to focus on regional New South Wales is because they are some of the most exposed when it comes to high petrol prices and the sheer distance that they have to travel. So we want to give our members and the community in regional New South Wales the option of buying an electric vehicle. You can't do that without the charging network. All too often what we've seen in the past is that the bush misses out. What Sydney gets, regional areas get many years later. We don't want that with electric vehicles. We want opportunities for our members in regional areas in the same way that they will have in Sydney.
And obviously the NRMA has done some research. I can see there's some thought into where they're being placed. For example, I read that I think 95% of your road trips will be covered by these chargers, I believe.
Yeah, so what we've done is we've looked at where people travel the most outside of Sydney, the areas, that the roads, that the network that carries the most volume, the places where people tend to visit the most, and that's where we've targeted, and that's what we're looking to do. So we want people to have confidence that if they want to take the family down the south coast for Christmas, they can buy an electric vehicle, they can reap the benefits of having an electric vehicle, they can drive down the south coast without the fear of running out of charge.
And a lot of these chargers, will they be powered by renewable energy, do you think?
Currently, they will go off the grid. The option is, of course, to power by renewable, and we'll be definitely looking at that. The company that we've partnered with is an Australian company. We wanted to make sure that we were using local talent, local jobs to build the infrastructure. One of the benefits of using electric vehicle technology is it does reduce the impact on the environment. And even off the grid that is run by coal here in Australia, even off the current grid, you still see benefits, significant benefits in terms of emissions. So that's an added benefit to using electric vehicles. And if Australia was to go down the path of powering its grid from renewable rather than coal, and that's obviously a separate debate. But if Australia were to go down that path long term, then obviously the benefits would be even greater.
So currently it's free for members to use, I believe. Is there a costing schedule down the track? Look,
it's currently free for members. It will always be free for members to use. NRMA members will always be able to charge at our charges free. We have 2.6 million members, so that's a pretty good spread, right? The costing factor we haven't even worked out. So right now the priority is to build them. So get them in there early. The reality is there's not a lot of money to be made out of these things because they are literally so cheap to charge compared to what you're paying at the Bowser. So, you know, it will take... Right now, petrol prices are increasing. Off $1.50 a litre, you know, most people are going to be filling up with $100, and if not that, not much change out of $100. A lot of people will be paying a lot more than $100 to fill up their tank. It's a bit more than a coffee to charge your car. So the prices aren't comparable. We're not doing this to make money. There's not that much money out of selling electricity to charge your car. If anything, the cost will be minimal, and it's purely to cover the cost of the watt.
And to support the members too, obviously.
Yeah, we're doing this to support regional communities. We're doing this to support our members, to help our members transition to electric vehicles if they so choose, and also by making it free or charging a very minimal cost, you remove one less barrier.
What can motorists expect, or how quickly can they charge their car on average?
On average, one of our fast chargers, you can get to 80% within 30 minutes, less than that even. The technology is progressing so quickly, the time savings are quite remarkable, just in the last 2 years. And so we would expect those numbers to continue to fall as they have been. As the technology advances, as more people buy electric vehicles, you will see that improve quite considerably. I mean, we're already seeing some significant advances globally where that time is being cut quite dramatically. So we would expect that to continue. Who knows where the technology is going to be in 10 years' time if you just look at the progress that's been made in the last 12 months alone.
I mean, some people say half an hour is too long, but personally I think resting every 2 hours when you're driving is a safe thing to do. And in that time you could certainly have a cup of coffee or have some lunch or something. Yeah.
And so one of the things we're trying to do is build these chargers near places we know people like to go to visit. So, not too far from out of town, not too far from beaches. So not too far from places where if you do have to pull up, spend a bit of time charging, you can do stuff. People should be stopping every 2 hours anyway, you're right. At today's current charging levels, it just means getting out, getting a coffee, stretching the legs. Before you know it, you'll be ready to go back again. The conversation we have been having with our members has not been a debate. It's not been an issue of should we do this or not. It has been an educational piece. It's been pointing to what's happening globally. It's been saying that there are countries not too dissimilar to ours that have announced that they will no longer allow petrol and diesel cars to be sold in those countries, in some instances within 11 years. And so it's also the reality that we face here in Australia. We don't build cars in Australia. We don't have a local car manufacturing industry. We import our vehicles. And so if the world is saying that there is going to be a time when we can no longer buy new cars that are powered by petrol and diesel, we have an obligation as the NRMA to do as we've done for the last 100 years, and that is to carry the community with us on that journey, to help them understand what that means for them and their families and for businesses, and to help with the transition. And you look back at our history, it's what we've done time and time again. It's at times not an easy conversation to have with people because they don't like change. There are a number of unanswered questions yet. There's issues around range anxiety, there's issues around price, but overwhelmingly, the discussion that we're having with our members in the community, this is not something we need to be afraid of. We have time. The days of petrol and diesel cars aren't going to stop overnight. Australians are notoriously slow at turning their vehicles over. We have one of the oldest fleets in the Western world. So you don't expect everyone to just dump their petrol and diesel cars and go out and buy an electric vehicle. And then you've got a second-hand market, which is very large in Australia. So there will be a need for petrol stations and petrol cars for quite some time. But in terms of the new fleet, there is a transition happening.
Very well said. And I'm so good to see the NRMA supporting electric vehicles in Australia. All right, Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Ludicrous Feed. Thanks so much for your time.
Anytime, happy to help. This is a good chat to have.
Excellent, and we'll catch up again maybe in a few months' time when there's more charges out there.
We'd be happy to.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Add a comment or a question for Pete, and we'll get them answered. As always, happy charging. I do solemnly promise, should I win a Roadster 2020 in Tesla's new referral program, to list this vehicle on an electric car sharing platform to allow all Australians an opportunity to drive this magnificent car as part of a greater effort to bring the electric vehicle to this great nation. #RoadsterDownUnder. Help me by using my referral code Thomas7208.